Great.
Okay, I'm excited to meet with Sarah McMahon today. She's an ECE professor at Sheridan College in the ECE program, but has also had over 20 years experience in early childhood education and teaching in various places, including Winnipeg and Nunavut, and now here in Ontario. And so we get to chat today, Sarah, about play and about activities for kids that help with their development. So thanks for being here.
Well, thanks for inviting me. And the other thing I want to add too, I'm also a mom to a toddler. So not only do I have the professional theory and working in infant and toddler rooms a lot, I also have the day-to-day 24/7 of having a toddler, which is quite different than handing them back at the end of the day at childcare.
Absolutely, absolutely. And it's real life experience, right? All the theory you get to apply and figure out what new theory should there be to understand childhood.
Yes.
So I wonder if you can share with me just your general philosophy or way of thinking about play for toddlers.
Well, play is children's work. And that is how they learn about their environment and the world and how things work. So for me, it's just a natural thing that happens. You can do lots of things to help that process. And when you're thinking about very young infants, they're just all about, I'm tongue-tied. It's all, play for them is all about simple things. Keep it very simple because they don't need complex, crazy schemes and setups and toys to learn what they need to learn in their age development. So thinking about, when I teach for my infant and toddler course with my students, they always have these complex ideas for activities. And my feedback to them is keep it simple. You know, having sometimes just clothes pegs and a bin to put the clothes pegs in is enough of activity. You don't need to worry about them trying to pin them clothes onto a clothesline. That's more of a preschool or school age kind of task. They don't have the fine motor for that, but keep it simple.
I love that theme of simplicity, especially when, you know, as parents, we get on Pinterest and think, oh my goodness, should we be doing all this? And if I don't, what's going to happen?
Nothing bad. And it's funny because like when I was a mom going through this with my own daughter, I was in mummy groups and all the other mummies, that was a huge theme and stress. And I was just like, my daughter likes, this is her favorite toy, her first year. It's a laundry cup and a formula scoop, a small one. This was versatile, and this is a bigger scoop from a formula, or I think it was protein powder or something, right? We had a code 911 because I left this at the doctor's office. And I actually went back and the secretary was like, you need a laundry? I'm like, yeah, it's her favorite toy.
You can't go through the day without this.
Yeah. So, and something as simple as this causes like, you know, eye-to-eye coordination. There's sound. You can make it as a drum. You know, you can add water to it in bath time. And so it's scooping and pouring that fine motor. And it's like they can chew on it. It's safe. They're not going to choke on it and all those other things. So simpling as your recyclable garbage is a great play opportunity. I always look for things around the house because there's lots of really great things out there that are marketed for this age group, but I don't think you need to buy those things. Yeah.
Yeah, so I wonder then too, because I've been in that place where, you know, both of us have worked in the field for a long time.
Yeah.
And even still, we sometimes get dry up with ideas and we start thinking, oh my goodness, what are we going to do today? Yeah. Do you have any tips or hints or either personally or professionally for coming up with ideas on either setting up the environment so that it's naturally conducive to curiosity, or things that you have discovered or found, or ways that you figure out what it is that you can do next?
Well, it's interesting you say about the environment, because what I teach my students, and I teach everybody with young children, environment can be the third teacher. So if you set up the environment in a way that children can discover and interact with things on their own, then you can sit back a little bit and observe. And part of it is getting to know your children, getting to know what they're interested in and what they're doing developmentally. If they're chewing, if they're teething, if they're, you know, offering things around the house that could do that. One of the great things in my kitchen when I was a mom and trying to cook with my toddler, once she could sit on her own. So she was probably like, you know, she sat at 6 months, so she was early. She crawled at 7.5 months, so she was on the move very early. So I made sure I had one cupboard in my kitchen full of Tupperware, and that was her cupboard. So while I cooked, and I have pictures of it, every single piece of Tupperware, all the lids, you know, a wooden spoon, all were on the floor, but that kept her entertained. She could stack them. She used I offered a wooden spoon or a metal spoon so she can make different noises with it. Sometimes I would offer her a metal pot if I didn't want a headache. I did not offer that. But just to look around to see what you have around the house and what they're interested in, because sometimes even at this age, giving them an empty cardboard box is an amazing toy that they can like crawl into, they can crawl out of. You can put windows in it to make it like a schoolhouse, or you can just, you know, do all kinds of different things with that box and just watch how they interact with that.
Well, I guess part of some of the big hurdles that some parents have are being okay with the mess of it. But with setting up the environment, you're deciding this is okay. The Tupperware will be everywhere. And it's okay. When she's done with it, we can pile it all back in the cupboard and then
and some days at the end of the day of cooking, I looked at it and I'm like, no. And I walked out of my kitchen, and that's just me. I know a lot of people have different ideas of like, you know, and also for their stress level, they have to have everything pristine and clean. Usually by the end of the night, everything was back in the Tupperware cupboard. But as a single mom by choice, I was just me. So some days if the kitchen, that Tupperware, it honestly, to be honest, sometimes it stayed out for a couple days, and I was okay with that because I knew she was happy. I knew she'd go back to it. And other days it was just a quick tidy up. One thing I did end up doing quite early on is take all the lids out of that drawer because I hated picking up all the lids plus all the Tupperware. So I relocated and made the space a little bit more accessible, and I was okay with the amount of mess that was going to happen. But that's part of, in that messiness of play is where the children are learning and figuring out how things happen. So we as adults have all gone through it, and sometimes we forget that mess, and being okay with kids exploring and looking at things, and also creating safe environments. So making sure that your plugs are covered, making sure that you have all that safety stuff so that if they are exploring in rooms and stuff like that, that they're not going to get hazards and be harmed.
Well, I want to just flag 2 points that you made that I think are worth highlighting. And the first is your daughter was early with milestones, and we talk about milestones in this group and how broad they are, and the worry that comes when babies are not early. We all relax when they meet the next milestone early, and we start getting a bit antsy when it comes late. So it's just another example of everybody's different, and the milestones you gave are perfect because those are the ones that everyone's waiting for. That is early. So if your baby's not doing that yet, it's golden.
And I wish that I had, after working with infants, that I wish that my daughter was late, because like she was walking at 11 months, and she was also like, when babies hit milestones early, often their cognitive ability isn't there yet, but they have this physical ability. So you have to be even more aware of safety and concerns. So there's worry on either side of the spectrum. And sometimes I'm like, I wish you could have just been that baby I could sit, and you would be happy to sit for like three months, and that was all you did.
Yes. But there's a trade-off, right? It's a trade-off. Well, I think that knowing our own personal tolerance for the mess, but also knowing that messy is okay. Like, we do not need to be cleaning up for someone else. We're cleaning up if we feel good with it cleaned up.
Yeah. And also too, like for your own mental health, like I know I have friends that say like, I can't sleep, my stress level increases if my whole house is a disaster. So if you set up a room or space, I have 2 different playrooms in my house. I have one, this is my basement office, and on the other side, way over where the window is a TV kind of rec room, playroom. And that room often doesn't get tidied up every single day. My daughter now is 2.5, so she actually helps me. Daniel Tiger, as much as TV is controversial, has some really great educational shows, and there was a whole program about tidying up. And they have songs. So my daughter sings that song and says, it's a messy mess, I need to tidy up. And so all of a sudden she's putting everything away. So sometimes I support educational TV and you have to do what you do. As an educator, I would be like, no, my daughter's never watching TV. And then I was a mom, and I'm like, yes, my daughter's going to watch TV a little bit. as she got older. But and then the upstairs playroom is off of my kitchen. So she has a kitchen, her own kitchen. She can cook with food. There's some trains and a dollhouse. So that play space always is tidied up, because for me, I need to have my upstairs level, my kitchen and my living room, and that area clean every day for my own mental health and well-being. But I'm okay to let the one in the basement go for a couple days.
Nice. Awesome. It's real. Yeah. It's the real balance, right?
Especially if you have young babies that are getting up sometimes. Like my daughter still, I shouldn't warn you, still gets up in the middle of the night, often once.
I'm glad you bring that up too, because we have a module on sleep, and we talk about it's very normal up until for way longer than we're led to believe.
So putting on that stress of having, we have to do this play, we have to do this stuff. And I remember when my daughter was 7, 8 months old, she was still getting up every 2 to 3 hours at night with me. So I was exhausted. I still really, during the day when she napped, I napped with her. Usually out of her 2 naps, at least one of them I would sleep, if not both of them, because I knew that I needed that sleep to keep going with her.
Right.
And she was a cat napper. She was only 45 minutes. So that's
which is also normal.
Yeah, because that's part of her temperament, part of her personality of who she is she's very active, and she's a go kind of person. She's kind of a mini me, so I kind of get that. But at the same time, I'm like, I like sleep, so I wish she could sleep more.
Oh, so. Yeah, the wish versus reality sometimes.
Yeah.
I'm wondering, Sarah, if you can, especially at this point in time, families are not accessing early years centers. Yeah. Those that might have been in daycare in an early childhood environment, like educational environment, are home. Some are still in daycare, but there are certainly a lot more kiddos at home than typical. And families maybe struggling with how to, and I don't want to say recreate, but maybe we can peel back a bit more about setting up the environment, because the temptation is to, get the wooden toys and get the, Montessori catalog and start ordering from it. You've given some really nice examples of like daily stuff to look around for. Yeah. I wonder if there's ideas on, especially since this is over a longer prolonged period than parents would have expected to have kiddos at home or to not be accessing early years center.
So one of the things one of the first purchases for my daughter at home to set up her sort of play space was getting a comfortable mat or a comfortable carpet, something that's really hers. It doesn't really have to be that expensive, but like, I have a play mat that actually looks like a rug. So it kind of gives me the aesthetic of, yes, this is happy, but it also really defines her space to know this is where she can play and it's comfortable. And it's comfortable for me to sit on the floor beside her to play. So that's one of those things. And when you're thinking about like under a year, having a basket of a few toys, children are teething. So having a lot of those rattles or, chew toys or things that are safe for them to chew on and rattle and make noise. I'm also a really big advocate of singing with your children, because that's how language develops. If you talk to your babies and you sing to them, it's a natural thing. So I, after being an infant teacher, have created songs about everything. Like, we're going to go to bed. We're going to go to bed. Let's go get our stuffies. We're going to go to bed, right? So it's just, putting some words to a certain tune, like kicking loose, because that's how language will start to develop. The more you talk to your infant and the more you talk to your child, the more they will receive, and then their receptive language will kick in. One of the things too, in talking about that language development, I'll get back to the environment piece in a minute, is that having a conversation with your infant. I know a lot of times when I was 2 years ago, when I was home, I went out to a lot of different programs. And now a lot of those family early years are not working. Early on centers aren't open. So you're sort of isolated in your own home. So it can get kind of lonely. I get that. But if you talk to your child and tell them what you're doing, or, oh, mommy's going to cook lunch. We're going to have mommy's gonna have a chicken sandwich today. What would you like? Oh, do you want some applesauce? Having a conversation, and it sometimes sounds a little bit weird. And I know I've worked with students who come into placements with me when I was in ECE in the infant rooms, because they're like, I'm talking to myself. No, you're not. You're talking to your child, and your child's receptive language happens before spoken language. So the more you talk and narrate your day and let your baby know what you're doing, will help them Also, it helps with transitions. So if they're really, really big on, you know, they're playing with blocks or they're playing with something on the floor and all of a sudden you smell something and you're like, oh no, I need to go do that diaper. Sometimes infants get upset if you just pull them from that environment and take them. Because think about you as an adult. If all of a sudden someone came and grabbed your hand where you're sitting right now and took you away and didn't say one word, you would have an issue with that, right? So if you approach your baby and say, Katie, I smell your diaper, let's go change your diaper. We're gonna go and sing a little song and up we go and pick them up and you take them to the change table to do all that business of getting them clean, that also helps. It helps with language development, but also helps with their sense of control over their environment. Because the next stage after they get through that sort of trust versus mistrust stage is autonomy versus shame and doubt in toddlerhood at 2. So that's where a lot of, I'm sure you're going to come back and have a lot of different topics around that. But it's a really fun stage for me because it's really all about children learning their own voice and their own autonomy over the world of what they want to have. Us as adults have a hard time with it because we want to control everything, and we kind of have to give control and have limits around those choices for those toddlers. But that's a different stage.
I love that though. I love that discussion, especially in the context of development keeps on rolling. And where as parents, we're often keeping up with it. We're rushing to keep up with it. And that shift to autonomy is a really big one. That is when a lot of conflict happens in terms of managing our feelings around their autonomy and that feeling that we're not in as much control as we think. And yet we are still their guide and we are still their leader and we're still the person in charge within the context.
Really be careful of their safety as well because they don't understand safety. But like for the environment too, it's as simple as just, you know, if you don't have a play mat, putting out a quilt. I remember when my daughter was 6 months old, I went on a road trip with my mom and we went to PEI. So we were gone for about 14 days. We stayed in a couple of families' houses and then a couple Airbnbs and places all through. But what I chose to do is I had a small bag, and I think I took a bag about this size of a few toys. That's all I took, like a rattle and stuff. And I took a quilt that she knew. And so any space that I went to, I put the quilt on the floor. And so then she had that recognize of this is her space, this is her home. She connected. And it was funny because I was at my one friend's house and her 6-year-old says, your baby doesn't like to be on your quilt. Why do you have it down? Because she's never on it. And I'm like, well, it just is her space to be, she felt like at home because then she can explore have that connection. So, you know, even having a small basket of a small different things, I'm sure everybody has been given toys. So you can have some of those. I'm not saying commercial toys are horrible or wrong. Another really neat thing I've made with my students as well as my daughter, this was a teaching prop that I made years before I actually had a daughter. It's an old water bottle, and I don't know if you can see, it's dyed water, and I just put oil. So this is I think you can use cooking oil, baby oil, whatever. And so when you mix it back and forth, there's bubbles that appear as they separate. So I actually made 3 in the primary colors.
Nice.
So that's another thing that you can like shake it. You can talk to children about shake it, shake it, shake it. And you talk to them, oh, do you see the bubbles? Look, the bubbles. And you can talk about the colors as they're exploring that thing. You can use different shapes of bottles. These ones were created more for toddlers because they're heavier and bigger, but you can look around to different, I've bought some really interesting drink options just because I wanted the plastic bottle. If you were making these at home, it's really important that you make them safe. So this is actually used with either glue. You can use white glue, it takes longer to dry. I'd use glue gun and screwed the top back on. And then to double safety it, I would put tape around just so that if it doesn't open, you don't want it to open. My daughter in her toddler room, when she was about 17 months, just a little bit older, she created this one. And this is something you can create. So it's a whole bunch of just random things that my daughter picked it out, but you could just take a bottle and put like, there's shells, there's popsicle sticks, there's feathers, you know, you could put macaroni, rice, and then again, they've glued the top and taped the top to make it safe. And this is a good shaker. It's still, it's over a year old. It's over a year and a half old, and it's still a favorite toy. Katie just asked me, where did that go? And I didn't tell her I had it down by my computer.
So go ahead, show us the next one, and then I just want to make a comment after.
Yeah. So this is another, so these are like bead, I think I found them in the dollar store. So they are storage containers, and they're really cool because they can all connect like this, but they can also come apart. And what I did is I just went to the same dollar store and I picked up, I think it was a pack, 2 packs of different types of beads. One was blue, so I put them in each. And then I glued the lids all down so you can't get them out. And then it's a great little rattle. And I loved it. I made it before Katie was born as an example, and she loved it from about 6 months to 12 months because it was small enough for her to grasp. And then now she loves taking them all apart and hiding them. So it's a toy that kind of grows through those ages and stages. Because your infants will start, the things that they play with now, they will continue to play with those differently as they go through their development and the stages and those norms and milestones.
And that was the exact point I was going to highlight. So I just want to, emphasize that this is not a, because some days can feel like you bring an activity out and it lasts, 30 seconds, lasts way shorter than it took to put it together. But what they get out of it will change as their brain changes and their development changes. And it's those lasting, simple, like the simplest things that you wouldn't have possibly thought were going to have the staying power. Like, that's just awesome. Awesome.
Yeah. Another thing around 6, 7, 8 months, my daughter got really interested in the remote. And it's a typical thing. Children think there's power. So I actually went to, I think, Value Village, or I asked around my family, and there was a couple of remotes of things that we don't have use of anymore. So this became Katie's remote. When she was really little, I took the batteries out and I actually taped down that so she couldn't get in there. But that's the one thing of the struggle, because like even at 6 months old, she wanted to control the remote. So I gave her her own and said, that's Katie's remote, and then she could have that access. And at my mom, she was always getting the telephone. And I know a lot of people don't have phones like this anymore. But if you do, this was, again, it was a dead one. I taped over the back so she couldn't get into the battery compartment, and she could carry around her own phone. And that really helped, even as young as like just to chew on it or whatever, because young children can sense and understand what has power, and they watch you all the way, even as young as like 6 months, 4 months. So they'll watch you, and if they see you always on your phone or always on with the remote, they think that's the best toy ever. They want to have access. So if you can, stop that power control by giving them something that's simple, that would be great.
It's leaning in instead of resisting and saying no, but finding a way that they get that.
Yeah. So, and finding a safe way for them to have that experience. The other thing you can do too is you can sense that, like, this is messy activities. So you might not be like, I'm not ready for the mess, but having a simple little sensory activity for young babies. There are some really cool commercial things that you can buy. And I just saw that. I'm like, this is so cool. It's actually like a tub floor. I don't even know. I'd have to look up, but basically it's like a play mat with a lip, so that you can keep the mess inside. So then you can it's almost like a big pool, like a swimming pool, but it's like only has this lid. I'll try and find the link so that Heather can show you what it is, but I think it's really expensive and you don't need it. I often would just put towels on the floor, some bath towels that weren't my guess best. They were just ones that have been around forever. And then I would get a bin. Usually the bin would have like one of those bins that's only about 4 inches, is that 4 inches? Like a very shallow bin. And then I would put something like quinoa or rice, just a little bit. You don't have to fill the whole bin up to the brim, but just putting like a cup or two of that. And then I would offer her scoop, her laundry cup. If you don't have to buy the stacking cups. If you have the stacking cups and you have shovels and all those things, you can. She still plays with these regularly in different ways. This became feeding her babies. Around 12, 13 months, she would go and feed her stuffy. So this was the spoon, and oh, you're hungry. And she would feed me, and she'd feed my mom and everything else. So that kind of thing, you can add other things as they grow to that, but having that opportunity to feel a texture. And I know using food is controversial because sometimes food shortages. You do what's comfortable for you and your family. That's why when I always used food, I always didn't waste it. Sometimes she would play with it for a week and then I would dump it. Because after a week, you know, things can grow, so you don't want to keep it too long. But at the same time, for my comfort level, that was a standard for me, like having for a week. Now, if she spat in it or sneezed in it or, you know, drooled in it a lot and it was really goopy and gross, it went out in the garbage that day. But if it was still relatively clean and, you know, she was doing that, that was fine. Another really fun thing to do with young infants, and when I was in infant room, I was known for the mess. And I worked in an infant room that had 10 infants, and our youngest was 6 weeks old. We had 3 that were 6 months, 7 months, 8 months. And then we had a cluster that was 10, 11, 12 months. And then we had 2 that were like 17, 18 months. So we had a wide range of development in that infant room. But one of the things I loved doing was sensory. And I would strip them down to their diapers because then you don't have to worry about their clothes. Often that meant in the winter, keeping the heat a little bit higher or having a portable heat source so that they don't get too cold. And so that we would do water play. So in that little tub, I would put just a little tiny bit of water so they could splash. Sometimes I put a little bit of soap solution so that you can make bubbles. Again, just use what's around the house, your own Tupperware, own spoons for them to splash in. You can add with food coloring, a little bit of drop of dye. Remember when you're using water, you always have to be there to supervise because children can have drowning incidences with a cup of water. So if you are doing that, if the doorbell rings or you're distracted, just pick up your baby and take them. Don't leave them alone with the water. But the other thing you can do too is cornstarch and water. Cornstarch and water is a really fun property that even I as an adult find really relaxing because it's a solid, but as soon as the heat touches it from your body, it turns liquid. So you can look up the recipes, and I can also give Heather a little bit of what the ratio is.
We actually made that yesterday in our house with our 8-year-old. So it's another one that has real staying power.
Yeah, and my daughter now at 2.5 is very much touch off. It's too messy. I don't want to touch that. And you will have, even as young as 6 months, people won't want to touch it or they do it. But if you give them a stick, if you give them a pine cone, if you give them something else to play in it, then they'll access it. Now my daughter needs to have a washcloth beside her because she doesn't like to have mess on her hands, which I'm like, you're my daughter. You can't do this.
Well, there's another good point that I think, you know, we have these images of what parenting will be like and what our kids will be like. You've just nailed it, something that we will be talking about. And that's that we parent the baby in front of us. That we have, and they change over time, and it's rolling with it, knowing that things aren't really static, but that by taking your approach that you're bringing forward today of simplicity, like just the very basics can grow with a child and can meet their needs for play without it being complicated or expensive.
Yeah. And the other thing too is, like, you know, a lot of people are talking about like early literacy and reading. You need to read and you have to have books. Yeah, you should incorporate reading and books in some of your things. But I remember there was a book, and it was Moo Ba La 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 by Sandra Boynton. She's actually releasing a new one, Boo, about Halloween. But I don't think it's ready till next fall. But anyways, it's basically the Moo Ba La 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 book, and that's a book from my experience of ECE. I have it memorized, so it's one of those ones that I can just rotate. And I remember the car used to be a struggle because my mom lived 2.5 hours away. And we did a lot of back and forth. And she got to the point where she would sometimes sleep for half of it. And the last 45 minutes, she would scream unless I recited that book. And so Moo Ba La La La, and there's something about that book and me talking and reciting that book actually calmed her down. So a lot of those car trips was me singing to her just to get there. And I know that, you know, cars and travel, we might not be doing as much because of COVID, but you still might be going to see families. So that is also stressful because kids aren't used to being in the cars, going out in their car seats. So those times are more stressful of travel.
Well, and it speaks again to the routine or the familiarity that brings comfort to kids. Like, they love novelty, but they want the comfort too. The quilt that you brought with you, the recognizable songs that she's used to, the toys that may be used differently, but they're the same toys. They're a comfort to her.
Neat. There's another really cool thing that is a lot of fun, and this is just a random bag. I'm all about sometimes packaging things into like fun little bags. So this is just a little bag that says Happy Camper, but my daughter loves when I bring it out because it's full of Velcro curlers. And they're all different sizes. One of the great things about Velcro curlers, they're cheap at the dollar store, and you can get different sizes, because that also is like a future math lesson about different seriation, putting them different colors, groupings, all those different things. But they stick to anything. They stick to your hair. They stick, I guess I don't have a sticky shirt, but they do stick to cotton. So I also sometimes when I'm doing it, it's really, sorry. I have a lot, because I also, this was something that I used in my infant rooms a lot. If you don't have a lot of sticky surfaces, you can think about tacking up also on your wall or playroom, on the end of a shelf, on the floor, like, thinking about how you want to aesthetically do it. But if you put up a piece of felt, then they can take them on and off themselves. And you don't, this is a little bit obsessive. So this was enough rollers for a toddler room of 15. You don't need to have this for your baby. If you have one, having one pack of maybe like 6 is enough. I think keep it simple. A lot of these tools that I have, my brothers joke that I have an ECE classroom in my house, and I kind of do, because it's kind of my field and it's a lot of stuff, but I'm constantly keeping it simple. Even now with my daughter, she's really into trains. I finally found some Thomas trains online. I got them, and I thought I was buying 5 trains because I thought that's all she needs for her tracks. It came with, I think it's 25 trains. And so it's way too much. So slowly, as the days, I've let her have all of them, but slowly every day I'm taking 2 or 3 away. So eventually she's going to have her 5 favorites, because I'm watching very carefully what ones is she playing with, what is she looking at, and then I disappear things. And because I think it's important too to have that rotation, because if children are at home all the time in an early childhood center, if they were in a program, ECEs naturally rotate toys and naturally change toys to children's interests. They always have very similar things, but there's different things that come in and out. So even now at my own home, is that not everything is out all the time. I have a couple different cupboards and a couple different systems of putting some things away and bringing them out later. When she was really little, she got given like, I think 15 or 20 rattles. She didn't need 15, 20 rattles, but I also had 2, I had a playroom set up at my mom's and one at my house. So half and half. So it was 10 and 10. And then what I did is put 5 away in the closet in her bedroom. I actually had one of those toy shelves that's all the bins that come off. And for her first 18 months or 20 months, that stayed in the closet, and that was the toy overflow. So she never really saw that. That was just where I kept the store things. So I had closet doors that kept it on it, and it was all organized. And as she had other bins and other places in the house, and as I decided, okay, it's been about 2 weeks, she's not really playing with that anymore, I would put that away and bring something new out.
Well, less really is more, because even just in terms of seeing what's there, when it's cluttered, we don't see anything. And, an overflowing room, child won't play with anything, yet you take everything away except for 3 things, and all of a sudden they're just
and
so
that's
excited.
And that's one of the things I talk to a lot of my friends too, and like in the environment, I love setting up the environment, and that was something I really wish if I had time. Another thing, and if parents would pay, it's also would parents pay for it, is go and consult around toy rooms and play rooms and play zones, because it is something I'm passionate about and I've helped a lot of friends set up things that are very simple. They don't cost a lot of money, but that idea is that, and maybe what I'll do too is I can take a couple of pictures. Now it's set up for a 2.5-year-old. It's not set up for an infant, but some of those ideas of what I'm talking about, maybe I can try and stage some photos and send them to Heather so that you can have that as well, because it is very simple, and that idea is less is more, is that even in a toddler room and a preschool room, an infant room, the ECs are constantly taking things in and out of the environment, because we want to stimulate children's interest, but we don't want to overstimulate them. So it's that back and forth trying to figure out how much children need. And it's a fine balancing act, because also too, it depends on the day. Sometimes they're okay with it and sometimes they're not. I remember I used to host people at my house for play groups. And I remember having just one other infant who was the same age as Katie. I think they were about think they were probably about 10 months old or 11 months old. And Katie was used to like a setup environment with different baskets and lots of things out. And she was okay because she would just take her basket out and play, because she was not atypical. She wasn't a typical for that age and development. This other 11-month-old got there, and every single toy basket was dumped. Everything was all over, and Katie kept looking at her going, messy mess, like mess, mom, mess, mom. And it was overwhelming to her because like she's like, this is not the way we play. Again, she's not a typical. She's never been typical in the development that way, and that's okay because every child is their self. And the other mom was so apologetic to me because she's like, oh my goodness, my 11-month-old just destroyed your house. And I'm like, no, she was playing, right? She was doing a typical developmental 11-month-old stage. There is a stage of dumping, and that stage you're entering into at like 8, 9, 10 months. It's so much fun to put things in baskets and take them out. So, you know, using boxes, you know, you can get the really cool dollar store boxes with lids, or you can just use your small Amazon boxes that you might be getting at home, right? You know, like you don't need to go out and spend a lot of money. Look around your house to see what you have. And then, you know, giving them a few things like, you know, giving them 5 or 6 coolers in a box and have them empty spill. Everybody always has coffee cans. This is one of my favorite things. Now I've jazzed up the coffee can with Mac Tack. You don't have to do that. And then I lived in Toronto for years. And so I saved all of my 2007 Metro passes because I used them. And then any gift cards that I've used that have been like no more money, I've kept them. And so what this became is a really great slot. So this was set up for an older baby or younger baby because the slot's really big in the lid. And I had kept another coffee lid that made it even bigger. So it's about that ability. So when they first started using it, to get the eye-hand coordination of putting it in, if you make the opening really big, they have success right away. So that makes them want to redo it. And as they master that, you can watch and you can switch out the lid if you keep a lid with a smaller opening. So then that becomes a little bit more tricky. But the great thing about this is not only is when they get it in, it makes a fun noise. So you can use like, you know, I also traveled a lot. So hotel room keys, sometimes I kept those. You know, just one of those things that you can do. This also is like a good drum again. And it also became another thing is that sometimes they didn't even want the lid and they just wanted to put them in and dump and spill and dump and spill. So again,
you're highlighting that the babies start big and get small, like more refined, and babies dump, they destroy before they build. Yeah. So moving towards that, these are awesome ideas.
The other thing is they're learning in that, they're learning in those processes of a dumping and spill. You might just see them making a mess, but they're learning so much about eye-hand coordination. They're learning so much that cause and effect, that I can do this. If I kick that bin and it dumps over, it's me who's doing that. You know, when you think about your really tiny babies, when they sat underneath those jungle gyms, at first, they didn't recognize that it was themselves kicking those rattles to make it move, right? They just thought like, oh, where's that sound? Oh, like you remember those startled moments. Like I remember my daughter lying there and going, oh, what is that? And it was her kicking the toy, right? So as I do that, that's the part of the learning, part of the awareness. And you, as you're there sitting beside them, you can be narrating it and you can be talking to them about that process. And so that will also help their language development and their receptive language as well is important, I feel, too.
Sarah, this has been phenomenal. I love your emphasis on simplicity. It's a value I have too, so it's so nice to see it highlighted. I didn't ask you this ahead of time, so you may not have websites in your head. If you don't, that's fine. If parents are looking to read more about this kind of approach to play, do you have a favorite book or a website or? And if you don't, you can give it some thought. And if you I'm going to give it
some thought and send you there. The other thing I have done with my daughter is the beauty of outdoors. So I have dreamt about hiking with her forever. And so when she was very wee, she went in a backpack or a front pack because I wore her a lot as a baby, where she was an anti-stroller baby. And she only really got into the stroller probably after she was about 15, 16 months old. Because of necessity of what was happening in our life, I needed to have her in a stroller to do what I needed to do. So I did do a lot of walks and hikes with her on, but at the same time is like that outdoors is a perfect playroom as well. So in all weather, we've done rain walks, we've done snow walks, we've done all those different things, bundling them up, taking kids outside. If it's not like, I'm not talking torrential downpour, lightning, crazy wind, but like a light drizzle, a light rain, taking them out for 15 minutes. And, once they get toddling, like maybe when they're little, unless it's for your own mental health too. Because when I did rain walks with Katie when she was little, I would put her in the stroller or put her in the carrier, and I'd bundle her all up, and I'd be under umbrella so we wouldn't get wet. And we go out for half an hour because it changed my mental health of being trapped inside. So getting the right winter gear and the right gear to support that kind of play is important, but also looking to that as well. There's a couple different sites that I'll try and think through about where to direct you, because the market is so saturated. And I find even now on Instagram, there's a lot of mummy bloggers and mummy influencers and a lot of people in our field that are being helpful and sharing bits and resources. But I feel like sometimes when I was in the moment of being the day-to-day mummy with young little, it was overwhelming. And because everything looks so perfect on Instagram and life isn't perfect. And you have to, I think, sometimes get used to the mess and get used to embracing. Some days with my daughter, when she was that age, we stayed in our pajamas all day long, and it was a perfect pajama day, right? So, you have to sort of let go. And sometimes those days I remember, playing and, giving a lot of incredible guilt, because I had worked in the field as an infant and toddler teacher for years. Part of my job was to program and to plan and do activities. And I remember talking to my mom saying, I'm not doing anything with my daughter. and I'm like, and she's like, but you are. And I'm like, I'm only doing like 1/10 of what I used to do. She's like, but you're a mom right now. You're not you're not being paid. It's not your job. So give yourself a break, because no matter what you're doing, it's perfect. You know what I mean? Like, don't, in some of those days that, like, when she was really little, I needed a TV break. So sometimes we played and the TV was on. As she got older, closer to a year, she started watching TV more. So then I cut that out because I didn't personally want her just to watch TV. I also pumped exclusively for my daughter for 14 months. She had a breast refusal, tongue tie, a whole bunch of other issues going on. Really, really, really in my heart of dreams, I wanted to nurse. And that was something that was really important to me. So I held on and I pumped exclusively. So what I did introduce TV in short bits was the 15 minutes every 4 hours that I pumped. The TV went on because then it could sort of entertain her a little bit while I was stuck to the machine.
Yeah.
But
I appreciate you bringing up the whole idea of guilt around what we should be doing, and that even just being there and being present is doing a lot, doing everything. Yeah. And I'm so glad you brought that up, and I think it's a fantastic way to end. I think we're going to end up having some conversations with the group to expound on that a bit. This has been wonderful, Sarah.
Well, thank you for appreciate your time. Yeah,
I'm so glad
that you invited me to drop in, and I will try and do some photos and some other things to send to you for the group.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Sarah.
You're welcome.
Okay, have a great day.
You too.